All right, so you sent us this UN report on AI governance, and wow,
Intense, right.
it's a lot. It's like they kind of just handed us this giant to-do list for like the entire planet.
And the fate of humanity is riding on it. No pressure. Right?
Yeah, exactly. So no pressure. But seriously, this report doesn't mess around. They're basically saying the world is totally unprepared for what's happening with AI.
Which is kind of understandable. I mean, it feels like we're all still trying to figure this whole AI thing out as we go.
True, but this report is like a giant wake-up call. It's time to set some ground rules before things get really out of hand.
Absolutely. It's not just about the tech itself either. It's about making sure AI benefits everyone, not just a select few.
Okay, so the UN is waving a giant red flag. Why now? What makes this report so urgent?
I think it comes down to this AI isn't some far-off sci-fi concept anymore. It's already here. It's impacting our lives in ways we don't even realize. And it's only going to get more powerful.
So we need to get a grip on it now before it's too late.
Exactly. We need to establish guidelines and guardrails. Think of it like this. AI has incredible potential to solve some of the world's biggest problems.
The report actually highlights some really cool examples, like AI helping to accelerate research for diseases like Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS.
Right. And that's just scratching the surface. We could see AI revolutionize healthcare, tackle climate change, maybe even solve world hunger. The possibilities are huge.
Okay, so it's not all doom and gloom. But if AI has so much potential for good, why is the UN so worried?
Because like any powerful tool, AI comes with risks. We're talking about things like algorithmic bias, mass surveillance, even threats to democracy itself.
And the report is full of examples of these risks actually playing out in the real world, which is a little unnerving to say the least.
It's definitely a reality check. But that's exactly why this UN report is so important. It's a call to action, a call to take these risks seriously and start creating a global framework for AI governance.
So it's not just about preventing robots from taking over the world.
Oh, that too. But it's bigger than that. It's about making sure AI is used ethically, responsibly, and for the benefit of all humankind.
Which is a pretty tall order.
It is. But if we can pull it off, it might be the most important thing we do this century.
High stakes indeed. So how do we even begin to tackle something this big and complex? Where do we even start?
Well, that's where this report gets really interesting because it doesn't just highlight the problems, it actually lays out a plan.
A plan to wrangle AI. All right, tell me more.
Well, it all starts with acknowledging that this whole fragmented approach, each country doing its own thing, just isn't going to cut it.
Yeah, the report calls it a patchwork of norms, which I think is putting it mildly.
Right. And the numbers back it up. They found that a staggering 118 countries haven't signed on to a single major AI governance initiative. Not one.
Wow, so we're basically operating in the Wild West of AI right now.
Pretty much. And that's a recipe for disaster because it creates this race to the bottom where countries lower their standards in a desperate bid to attract AI investment.
So instead of a global effort to develop AI responsibly, we get stuck in a race to the bottom where the most reckless approach wins.
Exactly. And the consequences could be devastating. Imagine a world where AI is used to erode privacy, exacerbate inequality, even fuel conflict. It's a scary thought.
It's definitely a wake-up call. So how do we avoid that dystopian future? What's the alternative?
The UN argues that we need a unified approach, a global framework for AI governance that ensures this technology benefits all of humanity, not just a select few.
Okay, that makes sense. But how do you get almost 200 countries to agree on anything, let alone something as complex as AI?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it? That's what we'll dive into next.
All right, then. Let's dive in. So the UN wants to bring some order to this AI free-for-all.
Yeah, they're basically saying we need to treat this like other major global challenges, like climate change or nuclear weapons.
Right. We've seen global cooperation work before. Think about the Paris Agreement or the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty.
Exactly. Those are huge achievements. And while AI is its own beast, the UN is hoping to draw on those past successes to create a roadmap for AI governance.
So they're not just starting from scratch.
Right. They're building on decades of experience in international diplomacy and cooperation.
Okay, so what's step one on this AI roadmap?
Well, first things first, we need to cut through the hype. There's a lot of misinformation and confusion surrounding AI.
Even I get lost in the technical jargon sometimes.
Totally. So the UN proposes creating an international scientific panel on AI, kind of like the IPCC, but for artificial intelligence.
You mean the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change? The folks who give it to us straight on the science of global warming?
That's the one. The idea is to have a similar group of leading experts who can provide unbiased, evidence-based assessments of AI.
So we can separate fact from fiction and make informed decisions.
Exactly. Because right now there's a lot of fear-mongering and exaggeration about AI, which makes it hard to have a nuanced conversation.
So this panel would be like the voice of reason in the AI debate.
Precisely. They'd provide the scientific foundation for global AI governance.
Okay, so we've got the knowledge base. But what about action? How do we actually translate that knowledge into concrete policies and regulations?
That's where the UN's proposal for a global policy dialogue comes in.
So instead of each country trying to come up with their own AI rules.
Exactly. The idea is to create a forum for sharing best practices, ironing out differences, and hopefully reaching some kind of global consensus on AI governance.
So it's about finding common ground and working together.
Precisely. And it's not just about governments either. The UN wants to bring everyone to the table, civil society, the private sector researchers, ethicists, you name it.
Because AI impacts everyone, so everyone should have a say in how it's governed.
Exactly. It's a truly global issue that requires a global response.
Okay, so we've got the knowledge, the dialogue. What else?
Standards. Right now, the world of AI standards is a bit of a mess.
Yeah, it's like the Wild West out there.
Yeah.
Everyone's doing their own thing.
Right, and that creates a lot of uncertainty and risk.
Yeah.
So the UN is calling for greater harmonization of AI standards. They talk about the need for guardrails and common rails.
Okay, break that down for me. What's the difference?
So guardrails are about preventing the really bad stuff, like AI being used for malicious purposes or to violate human rights. Common rails, on the other hand, are more about creating a level playing field, ensuring interoperability and fostering innovation.
So it's like building a global railway system for AI.
Exactly. Instead of having a bunch of disconnected rail lines going in different directions, we need a more unified system that allows for smoother, safer, and more efficient travel.
And just like a well-functioning railway system can connect even the most remote communities, a robust AI standard system could help spread the benefits of AI more equitably.
Precisely. That's the goal, to make sure everyone benefits from the AI revolution, not just a select few.
Which brings us to another key aspect of the UN's plan, making sure developing countries aren't left behind.
Right. The report emphasizes the need to bridge the digital divide and ensure that everyone has access to the benefits of AI.
Because if we're not careful, AI could end up widening existing inequalities.
Absolutely. That's why the UN is calling for a global fund to support capacity building in developing countries. This means providing financial and technical assistance to help them develop their own AI expertise, infrastructure, and regulations.
So it's about leveling the playing field and making sure everyone has a seat at the table.
Exactly. It's about global solidarity and shared responsibility.
Okay, so we've talked about knowledge dialogue standards and capacity building. What else is on the UN's AI agenda?
Data. We can't forget about data. It's the fuel that powers AI.
Right, and with great data comes great responsibility.
Exactly. The report stresses the need for responsible data governance. We're talking about transparency, accountability, user control, all those good things.
Because if we're not careful, AI could erode privacy and exacerbate existing biases.
Absolutely. So the UN is calling for clear guidelines and safeguards to ensure that data is used ethically and responsibly in the development and deployment of AI.
So it's about striking a balance between innovation and protection.
Exactly. We need to make sure that AI development doesn't come at the cost of human rights or democratic values.
Okay, so to recap, the UN is calling for a global scientific panel on AI, a multi-stakeholder policy dialogue, a more harmonized approach to AI standards, a global fund to support capacity building, and a strong framework for ethical data governance. That's a pretty ambitious agenda.
It is, but it's also incredibly important because the future of AI is not predetermined. It's up to us to shape it.
And that's a pretty daunting but also exciting thought. It
Yeah.
means we have a real opportunity to steer AI in a direction that benefits all of humanity.
Exactly. And this UN report provides a roadmap for doing just that.
So what does this all mean for the average person? What can we do to get involved?
Well, for starters, I think it's important to stay informed. Educate yourself about AI, its potential benefits, and its risks. The more you know, the better equipped you'll be to engage in this important conversation.
And don't be afraid to ask questions. Challenge assumptions. Demand transparency and accountability from those developing and deploying AI.
Exactly. This is not just a conversation for tech experts and policymakers. It's a conversation that everyone needs to be a part of.
Because ultimately, the future of AI is up to all of us.
It really is.
Yeah.
The choices we make today will determine the kind of world we want to live in tomorrow.
So let's make sure we make the right choices. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of AI governance.
It's been my pleasure.
Okay, so we've talked about the knowledge, the dialogue, The standards, the capacity building, the data governance. It's a lot, but it paints a pretty clear picture of just how complex this challenge really is.
It does. And it shows that we need to be thinking about AI governance holistically. You know, it's not just about one thing. It's about all these different pieces working together.
Like a giant puzzle.
Exactly. And this report is like the picture on the box, you know? It gives us a sense of what we're trying to build and how all the pieces fit together.
So where do we go from here? What does this all mean for, like, the average person? It's easy to feel overwhelmed by all of this, like it's out of our hands.
I get it. It's a lot to process. But I actually think that's why this report is so important. Because it reminds us that the future of AI isn't something that's just going to happen to us. It's something we're all actively creating.
Oh, I like that.
It's about recognizing that we all have a role to play in shaping this technology and making sure it's used for good.
So what can we do? Where do we even start?
Well, first things first, I think it's about staying informed. Educate yourself about AI, about its potential benefits, but also the risks.
Right, because knowledge is power.
Exactly. And the more you know, the better equipped you'll be to have informed conversations about AI and advocate for the kind of future you want to see.
So don't be afraid to ask questions, right? Challenge assumptions. Hold those in power accountable.
Exactly. Demand transparency, demand ethical considerations. This isn't just about the technology itself. It's about the values that are embedded in that technology.
And about making sure those values align with our own.
Precisely. Because AI is a reflection of ourselves, of our choices, of our priorities.
So the future of AI really is in our hands.
It really is. The choices we make today will determine the kind of world we want to live in tomorrow.
Well said. And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the world of AI governance. It's been quite a journey,
It has.
but a necessary one. And this UN report has given us a lot to think about.
Definitely. A lot to think about, a lot to discuss, and most importantly, a lot to do.
Absolutely. So to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it informative, thought-provoking, and maybe even a little inspiring. Because the future of AI is still being written, and we all have a role to play in shaping that story. Until next time.
See you then.